Thank you so much.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is my first time here in the UP. So I'm super excited. And thank you to everyone who brought me here and handled logistics for what was kind of a crazy day, including but not limited to a early morning UPS store run to Russian order that I didn't expect I would have to do. But y'all have a great UPS store, so would come back just for that. You heard a little bit about Gnara in the intro, but we are on a mission to help everyone answer nature's call quite literally through our patented Go Fly Zipper technology. We had some pairs out at registration that you can check out if you want to see specifics, or we can talk about it in Q&A. But I always open up speaking engagements by saying that if you didn't use the bathroom before this talk, you are definitely going to have to after. So apologies in advance, and thanks for bearing with me. I am going to talk about our journey as a company through the lens of 10 major lessons that I've learned. For context, I'm coming up on almost 3 years full-time, and I started this company, bootstrapped it from my college dorm room, and now we're VC-backed, 7-figure business, and so there are a lot of iterations and hiccups and wins and everything in between that we have experienced in that time. And I'm sure that I have a lot more to learn, and I might even disagree with whatever advice I give tonight by next week, but so far it has been true for scaling to this stage. And I know there's a mix of people in the room for whom starting a business is maybe just an idea at this point, or maybe you're more profitable than I am, but I hope there's a tidbit that everyone can relate to. And if not, you can ask me what you really want to know about in Q&A. For me, hands down, one of the most challenging things about being an entrepreneur or a founder of a small business or a creator or whatever you do or don't call yourself is finding mentors, but more specifically, finding advice and stories that are actually relatable and useful and realistic and honest. And so I didn't really have concrete examples of this when I was starting out, and to be honest, I'm still not sure that I do, but these are the things that I wish I had known and the things that I would use to summarize our journey thus far. So the first lesson is to start with a pain point in which you are very familiar. For me, that was peeing outside. I was a backpacking guide in college, and then one of my first jobs was working as a glacier guide in Alaska. And I was usually the only woman up on the ice for 8 to 12 hours a day. And in comparison to the guys who could turn around, unzip, go whenever, wherever, I found myself having to trek across the glacier, carefully avoiding crevasses, completely remove 3 to 4 layers in freezing temperatures, do my thing, put it all back on, and hike back to work. And that process was such a waste of time and energy that left me feeling cold for hours after, to the point where I started dehydrating myself. And I knew that there had to be a better way. So I get a lot of questions from students or those who are looking to maybe quit a full-time job and start something, and they know they want to do their own thing, but they don't know what it should be. And similar to the advice that they give authors, write what you know, my advice is do what you know. And in my experience, leaning into what you're passionate about never necessarily resonated with me, in part because I'm passionate about everything and also passionate about nothing at the same time. And so my advice is to lean into what pisses you off. And that is because I guarantee you have thought more about what frustrates you than what brings you joy, because that's just how the human brain is wired and how society is right now. And at the beginning, all you have is an idea, so you have to be able to sell that to others, and the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you know what you're talking about inside and out. And the thing that is frustrating for you is probably frustrating for others too, and I think necessity, but quite frankly, frustration, are the mothers of invention. So that is the pain point that Gnara started from. And I will also say that I know plenty of people who start businesses because they want to get rich quick, or they have something they're exceptionally skilled at and they just want to apply it to something, don't really care what it is. Those are also perfectly legitimate reasons to start businesses, and I personally know several people who have done that. But I think on the whole, it's hard to think of a female founder who didn't need a deeper reason to do something like this. It's so hard and you sacrifice so much that there has to be something kind of tying you to it more than just, this seems like I could do it fairly easily, which is never true. And so I keep a running list in a notebook that I flip to whenever I'm doing something that I find particularly frustrating, for example, taxes. And I think that's a good starting point. Two runner-up ideas I had for a business were, first, an app called Clipboard that would sync all of your waiting room check-in forms so that you didn't have to write your date of birth like 17 billion times within a year. And another one was a sunscreen that tingled when it was time to reapply to prevent getting burned. I actually pitched that one to the founder of Netflix, and he told me that was a bad idea for obvious reasons. But starting point with a pain point is the way to go when you're trying to get something off the ground. The second lesson I have is to turn your why into a story that has both a specific, memorable, and emotional event, but to pair it with a quantitative fact or statistic. So when I'm pitching, I start with the glacier story that you all heard, which people tend to remember, and then I pair it with more data behind it that shows it's not just a me problem, it's a we problem. In the case of Gnara, it's a we problem, W-E-E, pun very much intended. And I think it's relevant no matter who you're pitching, whether it's an employee or a retailer or an investor. Getting that kind of buy-in, it's necessary to show that there's some actual data behind it. So I started Gnara from, at the time we were called SheFly, from a 4-week entrepreneurship class. And so you entered with a super rough prototype, emphasis on rough. I hadn't sewn since 7th grade home economics class. And I spent winter break going to the Goodwill and getting sweatpants and jeans and all different types of pants, and then all of these other mechanisms to open and close them from Joann Fabrics. So I had Velcro and buttons and zippers going all kinds of directions. That's what I started the class with, and you can imagine what that must have looked like. And at the end of 4 weeks, had a full business model and won our first pitch competition, which was $250. And I took that to a local seamstress who helped me refine the design. But at that point, if I hadn't had a pitch that had tangible things in it, I don't think we ever would have gotten to that point, to be honest. And so in my pitch, there are a couple of things that I talk about. The first is pockets. We have 5 of them. They're 48% deeper and 16% wider than the average pockets found in women's pants, if they exist at all. Yes. That's a great example of, market data that you can turn to when you're pitching an idea. The other is giving more context on the history of pants in general and why this is so revolutionary. I feel like the number one response I hear is, this can't be the first time anyone has done this. How has no one thought of this? And there's a really complex history behind it. Here in the United States, women were not even permitted to wear pants and shorts at most colleges and universities through the 70s and 80s. I'm sure many people in this room have experienced that. And women were not permitted to wear pants on the floor of the US Senate until 1993, which means very little innovation has happened in this space because we haven't been wearing pants for that long, comparatively. And before I had any of that, and the last one that I share is that 56% of women have had a bathroom accident outside in the past year, which means more than 1 out of every 2 women that you know has peed her pants because she doesn't have this technology in them, which is absolutely ridiculous. But before I had all of that data, my pitch was just results from a Google survey that I did in that 4-week college class. So I had a couple dozen responses. So you don't have to be anything fancy or do anything fancy in order to get data. Before going full-time with Gnara, I was an economic consultant, and so it does not have to be statistically significant the way that that job did. You just need enough to give people a ballpark idea of what you're talking about and how big it could be. And I think for women in particular, it's easy to not know how to defend what you believe in if it's just a gut feeling. And so taking a step like that really helps you defend what you believe in. And I don't think that should be necessary, but unfortunately sometimes it is, so that's how I recommend dealing with it. The third lesson I have is to never let the fear of negative feedback or potential knockoffs prevent you from sharing and thus validating your idea. So in college, when I started this, I was working 4 jobs a semester to pay for the initial legal bills associated with doing design and utility patents in now over 30 countries worldwide. And that made me pretty hesitant to speak publicly about it because I was afraid that we would get ripped off. And honestly, I was just afraid I would be ridiculed. And the truth is, like I said before, you're probably not the first person or the only person to think of your idea. I'm certainly not. But you could be the first to do it in a certain place or in a certain way or take it to a certain scale. And that's what's important. And the only way to figure that out is to get constant feedback. So I began to pitch at every opportunity. I became known as the pee pants girl on campus. And I talked about it on first dates, anyone who got stuck to me on public transportation, really anywhere. And that is what has made the product like the perfect iteration that it is today. We've gone through over 100 iterations just on the pants alone. And that feedback is key. I say always take the constructive feedback into consideration. That's how we refined so many of the design features and then knew what to launch next. So we launched shorts last year. We'll be launching leggings this year. And it's also how we got our first licensing deal. So we'll be in other brands' overalls starting this summer. So keep an eye out for that. But, thank you. But while you're taking that constructive feedback into consideration, I would say don't give it more weight than the cheerleaders who are giving you positive feedback, because those are the early adopters who love what you're doing and can see the vision for it and are ultimately the ones that are going to be the first to adopt it and run with it and help spread the word. So they're important too. My fourth lesson is that if you are completely mortified by past versions of your product or service or business, you are doing it right. I think embarrassment is a major marker of growth. There's Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, has a quote that basically says if you are not embarrassed by your first iteration, you're moving too slowly, and I think that's true. Whenever I feel embarrassed about something, I lean into it because that means that I've come far enough to recognize how to place judgment on the place that I was, which means I've moved from it. And the founders I look up to most all have some version of this sentiment in their pitches. So for us, I cringe physically when I see pictures of those first iterations, and that is why strategically I am not showing you slides of them, but they are on the internet. And let's see. Yeah, the first, so there's one prototype in particular where I was showing up at trade shows with another brand's pants that I'd ripped out the crotch seam and put in a Joann's fabric zipper, and so they were like lime green pants with a hot pink zipper. They were ugly, but they were functional, and that's what mattered. And I think you have to start somewhere, and so always be proud of that somewhere, even if if that's not the first emotion that comes to mind when you think about it. My fifth lesson is that Steve Jobs is not the only successful entrepreneur on the planet. Don't be afraid to do it your way on your own timeline. So by this, I mean you don't need to drop out of college, which many people encouraged me to do in my very last semester, which made no sense to me, and move home to your parents' basement and emerge however many months later with this unicorn idea. I think that narrative is not accessible to most people, particularly women starting businesses. And so for me, finishing school and working other full-time jobs for several years allowed me to bring back experience and skills and a network back to the business and made it a lot stronger, and that's been vital to our success. I think businesses are a lot like romantic relationships in that you have to be a whole and complete and stable and independent person before you can be a good partner, and I'd say the exact same thing goes for business, and so that's the perspective I've taken on my startup. I think there's a bit of an exaggeration, especially in the startup world where you need to be doing everything super fast and taking all the risks, and while there are certainly times where that is true, the overwhelming reality, at least for me, is that I'm actually super risk averse and I'm a pretty slow worker. And so for me, paying off my student loans and winning 2 accelerator programs, that was the traction that I needed in order to feel comfortable before I was ready to jump off and do it full time. And so that was, I think, a full 6 years from the time I thought of the idea to the time I actually went with it full force. And it's okay to have a timeline like that. And as I mentioned, especially this is important for women entrepreneurs, one, because they're already in a disadvantaged financial stability position and give free labor in several different realms while being primary caretakers. And so there's a lot of multitasking that might need to happen on your business journey, and that's okay, and I think we should normalize that. And I think there's already enough pressure in starting a business. There's no need to attach these kind of black and white ultimatums at every turn. It doesn't actually work like that. The 6th lesson I have is that building a team has less to do with prior experience or relationships, especially in the early days, and much more to do with pure enthusiasm. So my current logistics and operations manager, Gabby, she was our first ever unpaid intern from our college days, and she stuck with us. She held out on getting other full-time jobs because she wanted her first job to be with Gnara, which was incredible. So she's entirely self-taught. She was a biochem major who now manages our wholesale logistics and back-end website edits and software implementation, shipping, communications, and all of that she learned on the job. And she knows so much about it, honestly, in a lot of these more than I do, purely because she was excited about it. And we've taken risks on other interns too, and other hires too, where maybe like the GPA wasn't exactly where you wanted it to be, or they didn't have a ton of seemingly relevant experience in the field. But our social media manager, Haley, she didn't even have a personal TikTok before she launched our company TikTok, and that grew from 1,000 to 100,000 followers in a year. There are so few things you can 100x in this type of business, but I think that was a great example of just finding someone who's super willing to try and experiment and throw everything at the wall. And that kind of growth is something that marketers with decades of experience likely wouldn't have been able to achieve organically, at least. And so my saying is that pure enthusiasm beats IQ or any other metric every time. I think there's a lot of conflicting startup advice about, oh, you should only create a startup with your closest friends because you have so many values in common and you're already on the same page and they're free labor. Or, oh, you should never start a business with someone you know because inevitably things will go wrong and then you'll lose that relationship. Or you should headhunt every single position and optimize everything. I think all of that advice is irrelevant, at least in the early days. You start a business with whoever's there at the right time, at the right place, who is as excited about your idea, if not more so, than you are. And that has definitely been true for the Gnara team, everyone who's come through. My 7th lesson is that the best remedies for imposter syndrome are preparation and vulnerability. So to the first point of preparation, do your research. Going back to my lesson about including data in your problem statement of a pitch, it's easier to feel confident when you know there are facts to back you up. And being a female founder in an extremely male-dominated industry and intentionally always putting myself in rooms where I know I'm not the most experienced person there means that I'm definitely not immune to imposter syndrome by any means. But I do find it easier to overcome when I know that I know my stuff. And something that's really helped me feel more confident in situations where there are unequal power dynamics, like pitching a large retailer or pushing back against investment terms, is reminding myself that only I am the expert in what I am doing. And same goes for everyone in this room. You inherently know the most about what you are doing, even when it doesn't feel like it or other people question it. So that's a good thing to just keep in mind. And to the second point about vulnerability, it's okay to say when you don't know. That is always better than bluffing. I probably answer more questions with, I'm not sure, but let me think on it, or I don't know, but I'll get back to you, than I do answer with definitive answers. And I think when you're vulnerable like that, it invites respect, but it also invites others to be vulnerable as well and meet you on that level, which is super important in a lot of business relationships. My 8th lesson is to track your progress and celebrate your wins, no matter how small. So sometimes a win for me is like, great, the business didn't go under today. Other times it's like, oh, cool, this email that I wrote immediately converted in an order, and I saw it happen in real time. And sometimes, rarely, but sometimes it's like, oh, sweet, I closed a 5 to 6 figure deal today. And all of those wins are equally as important. The world of entrepreneurship is incredibly nebulous and gooey, and you never really actually know if you're making progress on anything or not. And so I found it really important to make that tangible by taking copious amounts of notes, including on this, and being able to go back and look back on how you were thinking about a problem or how you were going about solving it, and then revisiting it weeks, months, years later, and being like, oh, I totally blew past that and now I'm on to the next thing, is a great way to see how far you've actually come and kind of put some kind of measurement behind it. My 9th lesson is that a good sense of humor is arguably the most important trait in an entrepreneur. Especially when you are doing something revolutionary like making pea pants, for example, humor is key for everything. In terms of marketing, it makes you more relatable and approachable, and it draws people into a conversation where they might otherwise feel uncomfortable, especially when it's a historically taboo topic. For Gnara, you see this in the way that we open conversations. I gave you a nice little icebreaker at the beginning there. And in the way that we talk about our technology. Our website is full of puns, whether it's number 1 or number 2, the Go Flies got you. And in the way that we sell to our customers at events, yes, you can go on the go. And in the way that we write our hang tags, steps for how to pee your pants quite literally. And in the way that we go viral on social media. So we have many live streams, and they are a fan favorite. In startups, things will inevitably go wrong, and mistakes and bad luck and internet trolls are a lot easier to move past when you have the ability to laugh at both yourself and at the ridiculous reactions that other people will give you and give the thing that you're doing in the world. I also think that it thickens your skin a bit and turns everything into an opportunity. We get a lot of messed up comments, for lack of a better phrase, on social media. There was one in particular on a TED Talk I gave that said, this is toxic feminist propaganda. And you know what we did? We made pink stick-on patches that said toxic feminist propaganda, and they sold out in the first month. And we just reordered them, so there's more on our website if you want. We've also done dramatic readings of some of far worse comments we've received. And those are the ones that actually blow up on social media and open us up to an entirely new audience that we wouldn't have reached otherwise. So we thank our haters for the constant flow of inspiration and the good laughs along the way. My final lesson, or at least for now, is that you should end every single interaction with an ask. I learned this in the month-long entrepreneurship class I took before going full-time with Gnara, and I think it's one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given. It doesn't matter who the audience is or how small or large the ask is, you never know where it's going to go. And for me, that has been everything from, like, click this link if you want to sign up for our wait list or to be a prototype tester. In the early days, or follow us on social media, or if we're having a slow month, I would ask people to literally buy on the spot. Hint, you could always use more each month. And these have led me to lots of hires, to a 5,000-person wait list at one point in time, a factory, countless intros. So always ask. The worst that happens is you put yourself on someone's mind who didn't know about you before. Even if they can't help you right now, you don't know what it might turn into in the future. So tonight, my ask for you is this. If any of you either work at a brand or know someone at a brand that could benefit from implementing our patented Go Fly Zipper technology, please let me know. I would love an intro. Tagging us in their posts to show that there is authentic demand is also a great thing. That helps a lot. for other use cases and products that we haven't made ourselves yet. So to give you an idea of the requests we've been getting so far, we have military uniforms, police and ranger uniforms, fishing waders, jumpsuits, flight suits, ski bibs, sailing shorts, pajamas, bike kits, hunting pants, and the list goes on. My email is on the screen, and I'd love to hear from you. So thank you, and I'm sure I'll have another 10 lessons by next week. You can follow up with me then to see. And we're going to open it up to Q&A now. And if you raise your hand, I think we have some mics circulating.
We
and
do, but first let's give a round of applause for Georgia Grace. All right. We are ready for questions, as she mentioned. So Lauren and I see some hands raised. All right, I'm coming your way.
Hi, thank you so much. What are some of the